We're going to get started now. So for those of you that know me, hello, I'm Dr. Shannon, Dr. Jeff Shannon, I'm the owner of Hudson Valley Audiology here in Rockland County. And just a little bit about my background, I joined the practice here in 2010. Before that, I was working out in Portland, Oregon at the National Center of Rehabilitative Auditory Research called NCRAR, which helps veterans that have hearing loss and tinnitus doing research out there. So I was able to work with some great principal investigators on various research for hearing and tinnitus and auditory processing. But yeah, I've been here since 2010, and my specialty is with tinnitus. I see a lot of tinnitus patients here in our clinic, and I'm excited for you to join today. By the way, this webinar is being recorded because a lot of people can't make the time, so we'll put it up on our YouTube channel for later. And we're excited to talk about bi-modal stimulation. And you're going to see also we have Dr. McCluskey with us today from one of the companies that offers bi-modal stimulation called NeoSensory. So Ashley McCluskey, thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yep. And real quick, I'm just going to make sure I mute everybody. And then at the end, we will certainly have time for questions. So just we're going to get started here. If you have any issues, you can certainly use the chat or the question, and that'll pop up for us to see. But just going to go through some high-level information, and then we're going to dive right into what we're here for today. So first of all, tinnitus. First of all, pronounced tinnitus or tinnitus. Typically, clinicians will call it tinnitus. But it affects roughly 50 million Americans. So that's estimated roughly around 30% of the population have actually experienced tinnitus at some point. If you've ever been to a loud concert, if you've ever maybe shot a gun or been around some type of loud blast around the 4th of July, you may have had some temporary tinnitus. For roughly 13%, it's persistent. It's not going away. It's staying there. And actually, 80% of those that have tinnitus also have hearing loss. Sometimes people are surprised to see that statistic. Veterans who I've worked with and still do are 3 times more likely to suffer from tinnitus. And of that large population, about 10 million of these people say that it's a serious problem. They seek medical attention. And unfortunately, for about 2 million, it's so debilitating that they have a hard time just functioning, going to work, and just going about their day. So it can be a really serious problem. The next slide here is just kind of labeling between bothersome and non-bothersome. So see a lot of people that say, yeah, I have tinnitus. I'm not bothered by it. It's not a big issue. So here we are here. So you can see for about 80% of the population, it's a non-bothersome problem, right? But for other people, unfortunately, it affects us another part of our system and our brain called the limbic system that I'll get into here in just a little bit. So how we classify tinnitus, there's a number of ways we classify it, primary and secondary. Primary is what we typically see in our office. It's originating almost always in the brain. And now we have these new ways to manage it and offer treatment and help. Secondary is usually from another underlying cause. This could be due to blood flow in the auditory system, some type of other issue, a tumor, something like that could be serious. So more often than not, we're seeing patients that have what's called primary tinnitus. All right. And so there's a lot of sort of physiologic models out there. I'm just going to kind of give a really high level of where typically we have some sort of disruption of the auditory signal going from the ear to the brain. And this deprivation of sound inside the auditory system, especially the auditory cortex, causes the cortex to sort of get confused, right? It doesn't really know what to do. So it sort of starts to create this disruption and this spontaneous chatter. And this chatter occurs, now becomes a little synchronous. And when it becomes synchronous, it can create some type of sound that the brain says, I'm hearing this sound. It can sound like a number of different things. Typically, it's something like a ring or a hiss or a high-pitched sound, a roar. I had one patient that said it sounded like 5 dogs howling, unfortunately. So it can be really a combination of sound or just a single solo sound. Anyways, so then you have this overactivity, and now it's there. And what can happen is now we have the attention system, the frontal part of our brain saying, what is that over there? I'm hearing something that I should not be, and I can't identify what it is, right? So that's our attention system really grabbing onto it, right? And then what can happen is our limbic system, our neuro, our system down there, it kind of gets involved and it doesn't like it, right? And it can kind of say, this is a negative thing, it's a threat, and we need to do something about it. And so this is what sometimes we call it the fight or flight system, where, are we going to try to fight this thing, or are we going to try to run away from it? Well, in this case, you can't really run away from it, right? It's there and it's hard to fight it. And so therefore we have these emotional reactions to it. We get upset, we get frustrated. It can bother our sleep, which can also make it worse. So there's a lot that happens there. So it's really a psychophysiologic phenomenon that occurs with tinnitus. These kind of show some of the things that can aggravate tinnitus. And you're going to see the top two that I'm just really going to focus on is stress and fatigue and noise exposure. Though those top two things can really affect the tinnitus, but you can see there's a number of other things that can also affect the tinnitus as well that patients will report. So happy to talk about any of these or all of them, but let's get into a few more things. There's some temporal characteristics, there's some duration characteristics, and then of course I've already talked about the impact. So if you're listening to this and watching this and you have tinnitus, maybe you could kind of look at this and say, what kind of tinnitus do I have, right? Is it something that's spontaneous or temporary? Is it more occasional, happening every few weeks or months? Is it intermittent, kind of occurring on sort of a weekly basis or maybe even a daily basis? Or is it constant, meaning at any point in time, if you stop, you hear it. And sometimes you don't even, for some patients, they don't even have to stop. It's there all the time, right? So that's the temporal characteristics. The second one is the duration. And this one's really basic as far as saying, has this occurred within 6 months, or has it been 6 months and longer? And that's sort of the high level, how we identify whether it's acute and it's shorter term, or is it chronic and maybe permanent. And then finally, we have the bothersome and non-bothersome. And maybe you could be somewhere in between, where it's maybe sometimes bothersome. But this is important, where it can affect, communication, concentration, sleep, just overall enjoyment in life, and spent significant time seeking treatment, sometimes online, like we all do, right? And I always say the internet is the good, the bad, and the ugly. And there's some excellent information out there, and there's also some just downright awful information out there. So we're here to provide some clarity today and talk about some exciting new treatment. Okay. And so the idea here is to break this vicious cycle. All right. So whether you're someone that's sort of early onset of tinnitus, or maybe you're someone that's had tinnitus for years or decades, I'm here to talk about a new treatment that we've started in our office that is now available. And that treatment is called bi-modal stimulation or bi-modal neuromodulation. So I just stopped sharing my screen because now's the time, as I'm going to be passing the torch over to Dr. McCloskey from NeoSensory. So if you want to share your screen, you can, Ashley, and I'm going to give you guys a quick introduction to her. So Dr. McCloskey is an audiologist, and she's an account manager at NeoSensory. Before joining NeoSensory, she was a clinical audiologist helping patients with hearing loss, tinnitus, and vestibular disorders. She leverages her extensive clinical experience and passion to helping others to succeed in her role as the account manager. So I'm really excited to have her join today. If you guys have heard about NeoSensory or bi-modal neuromodulation or stimulation, Ashley, take it away.
All right, thank you. All right, so I'm super excited to be here and to talk a little bit about NeoSensory and what we have to offer specifically for patients suffering with tinnitus. So let's go. Everyone can see my screen, yes?
Yes, I can.
Okay. All right, perfect. So I just have to give a disclosure that I do work for NeoSensory. Okay, so let's first talk about kind of where NeoSensory came about and where this entire idea was born. So on the slide, what you see is our founder and CEO, David Eagleman. He is a neuroscientist at Stanford University. He does a TED Talk and kind of talks about his research. So at Stanford for several years, he had been researching researching what we call sensory substitution. And so he explains that in his TED Talk and kind of explains where the product was developed. He's also a best-selling author, and he actually has a podcast on Apple, which is ranked #1 in the science category. So if anyone here listens to podcasts, it's a really good one. So what I want to do is I just want to play a super quick clip of his TED Talk just to kind of give you an idea of where the science is behind all of this and kind of where his idea generated. So let's play that.
Well, here's the big secret. Your brain is not hearing or seeing any of this. Your brain is locked in a vault of silence and darkness inside your skull. All it ever sees are electrochemical signals that come in along different data cables, and this is all it has to work with, and nothing more.
Oh, sorry guys, I just want to...
Well, here's the big secret. Your brain is not hearing or seeing any of this. Your brain is locked in a vault of silence and darkness inside your skull. All it ever sees are electrochemical signals that come in along different data cables, and this is all it has to work with, and nothing more. Now, amazingly, the brain is really good at taking in these signals and extracting patterns and assigning meaning, so that it takes this inner cosmos and puts together a story of this, your subjective world. But here's the key point. Your brain doesn't know and it doesn't care where it gets the data from. Whatever information comes in, it just figures out what to do with it. Okay, so what this means is this. The lesson that surfaces is that there's nothing really special or fundamental about the biology that we come to the table with. It's just what we have inherited from a complex road of evolution. But it's not what we have to stick with. And our best proof of principle of this comes from what's called sensory substitution. And that refers to feeding information into the brain via unusual sensory channels. And the brain just figures out what to do with it. Now, that might sound speculative, but the first paper demonstrating this was published in the journal Nature in 1969. So a scientist named Paul Bach-y-Rita put blind people in a modified dental chair, and he set up a video feed, and he'd put something in front of the camera, and then you would feel that poked into your back with a grid of solenoids. So if you wiggle a coffee cup in front of the camera, you're feeling that in your back. And amazingly, blind people got pretty good at being able to determine what was in front of the camera just by feeling it in the small of their back. Now, there have been many modern incarnations of this. The sonic glasses take a video feed right in front of you and turn that into a sonic landscape. So as things move around and get closer and farther, it sounds like a cacophony. But after several weeks, blind people start getting pretty good at understanding what's in front of them just based on what they're hearing. And it doesn't have to be through the ears. This system uses a electrotactile grid on the forehead. So whatever in front of the video feed, you're feeling it on your forehead. Why the forehead? Because you're not using it for much else. The most modern incarnation is called the brain port. And this is a little electrode grid that sits on your tongue. And the video feed gets turned into these little electrotactile signals. And blind people get so good at using this that they can throw a ball into a basket, or they can navigate complex obstacle courses. They can come to see through their tongue. Now that sounds completely insane, right? But remember, all vision ever is electrochemical signals coursing around in your brain. Your brain doesn't know where the signals come from, it just figures out what to do with them.
Okay, So I like to play that just because it kind of talks about sensory substitution and how it works. So if you are able to ever watch the TED Talk, it's about 20 minutes. It's super interesting. But as the TED Talk goes on, he's showing that, so David created a vest, and what the vest consisted of was vibratory motors on the front and the back of the vest that picked up on speech sounds that actually vibrated differently for different speech sounds. So he had a graduate student at Stanford University who was born with profound hearing loss. And he had him wear this vest. And over time, after wearing it and being exposed to speech, he was actually able to understand words via the vibrations on his chest and his back. So in the TED Talk, you'll see David, and he's saying words to his student who's wearing the vest, and his student's actually able to write those words on a whiteboard, which is really amazing. So that is where the entire idea of the wristband came about.
Well, here's the big.
This is what the wristband looks like. Looks very similar to a Fitbit. I actually have one here. I always like to show it in person too. It's rather small and pretty simple, lightweight. So let's go to the next slide here. So just to clear something up, because this is always a misconception when people are learning about NeoSensory, is that with this one wristband, you have 3 different modes that you have access to. And so I am going to really delve into the duo mode, which is our tinnitus solution, but I do want to touch very briefly on the other 2 modes, just so everyone on here is aware of, what all this wristband can offer you. And we do even have some patients who are using 2 or more of these modes with the wristband. So this just shows a little bit of a screenshot here of what it looks like when you do take the wristband out of the box. You will download the app and you pair it to the app, and then it's going to ask you to select a mode. You can choose more than one, just like I had said, and then it'll kind of walk you through what you need to do next. Obviously, too, whenever you're seeing your audiologist, they can kind of walk you through these steps as well. There is a drop down in the app, and so you can always choose on the drop down which mode you'd like to go into. So let's kind of dive into that here. So I always talk about sound awareness first because it's directly derived from what David was talking about in the TED Talk. So from the vest, he created the wristband for a mode that we now call sound awareness. So sound awareness is for our patients with profound hearing loss. Kids or children who were born deaf, maybe people who have lost their hearing over time. These are going to be people who may use hearing aids, but more for a sense of just knowing what's going on around them, more than understanding speech. So what the sound awareness mode can do for you is it can help you to be aware of your surroundings. So for example, if your phone is ringing, if someone is calling your name, if there's an alarm going off, a baby crying, you're going to feel vibrations on the wrist, and it's going to alert you to those sounds so that you're aware that that's happening. I know, so before, just to give you a little background, before I came to NeoSensory, I was a clinical audiologist for 6 years. And so, during that time, I saw a lot of people who wore hearing aids, but maybe lived alone. And they would take their hearing aids out at night, but that was very scary for them because they didn't have a sense of safety that if an alarm went off, if someone broke in the house, if a baby was crying, that they wouldn't wake up to this. And so this can be a great tool for those people who have more severe hearing loss. There's also, which is probably my favorite part of sound awareness, an alarm clock mode. So even for those people who are deep sleepers, you can set your alarm and then it'll vibrate your wrist to wake you up. So that's just a little bit about sound awareness. And then also who's a candidate. I know we kind of talked a lot about this, but anyone with severe to profound hearing loss, whether you wear hearing aids or not, whether you have a cochlear implant or not, you can use that in conjunction or alone. All right, let's go into Clarify, which is the next mode. So Clarify is specifically for individuals who have hearing loss more in the higher pitches. And so what the wristband does is it picks up on speech sounds and it vibrates differently for different high frequency speech sounds. And so where we see this most used is in conjunction with hearing aids as almost like an accessory to hearing aids. So if someone has hearing aids but is still struggling to hear and understand speech, this can give you a little bit more speech understanding. So you wear this wristband, you do have to wear it for a certain amount of time so that you're able to start learning what those vibrations mean. Exactly what David was talking about in that clip that I showed you is that your brain starts to make sense of what those vibrations mean. And in time, you're able to help you with speech understanding, even with the use of hearing aids. So for candidacy for Clarify, we say it's really anybody with difficulty understanding speech with hearing aids or without. All right, so that's just a really brief overview of the other two modes, but I know we're really all here to learn about the tinnitus solution, and so let's dive into that now. So, coming from clinic, I know that it was always very difficult for me because I saw a lot of people who had bothersome tinnitus, and we definitely had things in our toolbox that we could provide these patients, but sometimes, even with the use of all of them, they came in and they said, you know what, I'm still having difficulty. The tinnitus is really bothersome to me. Even if, say, a patient was wearing hearing aids during the day and that helped tremendously, if you take your hearing aids out at night, then that tinnitus can then become bothersome again and affect sleep and things of that nature. So as some of you may know, being, patients who may suffer from tinnitus, a lot of times, and just like Dr. Shannon said, 80% of people who have tinnitus also have hearing loss. And so when someone comes in and says, I have ringing in my ears, buzzing, hissing, whatever that sound may be, we do a hearing test to determine if there is hearing loss. From there, if you do have tinnitus, sometimes just wearing hearing aids and the use of amplification can help with that. Sometimes that we need to go a step further and put, a sound generator, what we call, so some kind of white noise, masking noise in the hearing aids, which can also help. I know I always used to recommend like a sound machine at night for my patients. There's a type of Zen therapy. Obviously, counseling is huge for this, and muscle relaxation and things like that help. But for the first time, we actually have something that we can offer now that will actually take the perception of tinnitus down. And so what I mean by that is usually with the use of hearing aids or the sound generator, it works when you're wearing the hearing aids or sound generator, but once you take those out, then you're aware of your tinnitus again. And so with bimodal stimulation, we are actually able to help bring that perception of tinnitus down, and it's a long-lasting effect. So I know we've been throwing the word, bimodal stimulation or neuromodulation around. Really, essentially what the definition of this is pairing sounds with touch. And so with the NeoSensory wristband, Duo works with hearing tones and feeling vibrations on the wrist simultaneously. And we'll get into that a little bit more here in a minute. So this, again, can actually reduce the volume of the tinnitus that you're hearing. And again, long lasting thus far, that we're seeing that patients who find relief from our product are actually finding that it's long lasting and continues, which is amazing. So let me switch sides here. So with Duo, so you will go get an evaluation. If you are deemed a candidate for the NeoSensory Duo, you'll receive the wristband, you'll download the app, you'll pair it to your phone, and then it's going to ask you, let me actually switch over here just so you can see this. So I just put some snapshots of the app in so you guys kind of understand it's a very easy thing to use, and usually your audiologist will kind of help you through this. A lot of audiologists actually do some of this testing in the booth, and so it kind of takes the guesswork out of this for you. But what it asks you whenever you get into the app is, can you pitch and loudness match your tinnitus? And so essentially what you're trying to do here is find a tone that sounds very similar to what you're hearing in your ears. And so like I said, a lot of audiologists actually do this in the booth so they can help you through this, and then you'll save it. Once you save this, it's going to save and you don't have to go back in and change it. This will kind of be the settings that you have permanently. So then when you go in the app, you're going to see the screen to the left. So it's super simple to do. You're going to put your wristband on. You're going to press the start button here. And you are going to listen to tones while feeling vibrations at the same time for 10 minutes. So the protocol for this treatment is you're going to do this for 10 minutes every day for 8 weeks is the protocol. So it really isn't going to take much of your time to do this. You can pick a time during the day that best suits you. You really don't need to be attending or listening to the tones, but you do have to be in a relatively quiet environment so that you can hear it. Some people read a book when they do this. Some people watch TV in a low volume, whatever is comfortable for you. But like I said, it's only 10 minutes a day, which is great. Once you get to the 10 minutes, you are going to see that the background turns green, telling you that you are finished for the day, and then you can take the wristband off. So this is just showing, and some people are into research, some people aren't. So I'll just touch on this super briefly. But our research kind of backs what we're saying with this. So what we found is that individuals with bothersome tinnitus are finding a huge improvement in this. So the TFI, just to give everyone as a reference, is a questionnaire that audiologists use when our patients come in and say that they do have tinnitus, especially bothersome tinnitus, to kind of see on a scale how bothered you are by it, which gives us then kind of a background of where we need to go as far as treatment. And so again, what we're finding is that we're seeing a huge improvement, a clinically significant improvement with individuals who are very bothered by their tinnitus. And so that's what this graph is showing here. And then we also did, this is again just more research, but we did do a study with one of our groups that we are partnered with. They wanted to make sure that our product worked before they, offered this in their clinics. And so it's showing, so 62, just to give everyone a reference, is a patient who would be very bothered by their tinnitus. And so after an 8-week time period, people are coming down to a much lower level so that they still hear it, but they're not bothered by it, where it's affecting their concentration, their sleep, things of that nature. But this is just an average. So I always like to show this because this shows every patient who did it. And we had someone in the 90s, which is essentially as high as you can score on this as far as being bothered by tinnitus. And then this person actually dropped down to a 5, essentially meaning that they don't really hear it anymore. So person to person, it's very different as far as the results go. But in our studies, it shows it's 91% effective. So, it's a huge, huge improvement. So super exciting. All right, let's just get into a few things for the use of Duo. So again, we already talked about this, but I always like to stress the importance of this is 10 minutes every day. We can't, we always say it's not going to be more effective if you do this for like 45 minutes every day. It's really just 10 minutes a day, but the key is make sure that you do it every single day for that 8 weeks, because what we're trying to do here is we're trying to teach our brain that the internal tinnitus is an internal sound, and then those sounds during the Duo session with the vibrations is an external sound. And in the process of learning this, your brain is actually able to rewire around the faulty wires that are causing tinnitus, and actually able to bring down the perception of that ringing or whatever sound you hear in your ear. So every day is very important for this. Ensure correct fit. I always put this, and obviously your audiologist will help you through this, but we want to make sure, let me show you guys just so you can kind of see. It might be hard to see but there's vibratory motors on the bottom here. And so it's very important that the wristband is on your wrist tight enough so that those vibratory motors are actually touching the skin so that you're able to feel those vibrations. And then obviously throughout this, you'll have your audiologist to support you through this if you have questions about anything with the protocol. All right. Again, who's a candidate? I think this is pretty straightforward, but it's anyone who is suffering from bothersome tinnitus. Okay, let's just go through a few things about the device. People always like to know this. So it only takes 30 minutes to charge from 0 to 100. And then the battery typically lasts 24 hours. So it is a long battery life, especially if you are using it for some of our other modes and you're wearing it every day all the time. You are able to just do a quick charge and then you're good for the rest of the day. IP rating, so it's telling how water resistant or waterproof the device is. So this is not a waterproof device, but it is water resistant. So you just want to make sure, like, hand washing, normal hand washing is okay, but any swimming, showering, you do want to take the wristband off, or any dust heavy things like woodworking. Okay. This is just a sizing guide, which your audiologist, again, will help you through, but there are 2 sizes, so we kind of have something that will fit anybody. And you can see on the wristband here, there are several slots here, so truly this will fit just about anybody. So your audiologist can help you through that. Okay, so what are the next steps? So if you guys are listening and you think, man, this sounds like this could be something that could really be beneficial to me, you can call Dr. Shannon's office, schedule an appointment. They'll take you through a hearing evaluation, a tinnitus evaluation, do some questionnaires, and then from there, they can determine your candidacy for the product and kind of walk you through step by step. This is just kind of a general overview so you guys understand more about the product. So yeah. So let's see. So that's really all that I had today, but I wanted to leave time for questions because I'm sure that some of you may have questions about this. So I'm happy to share the floor and ask any questions.
All right. Thank you, everybody. And have a great day. All right.
Bye. Bye.
All
Take
right.
care.